All right, we're up and running.
Hi, this is Tyler Roike, and you're listening to ABC Agent Broker Conversations. And I'm here with my co host, Jimmy Doolin. Jimmy, it's great to see you, brother.
You too. Good morning.
Good morning, indeed. So, today we will be having an election conversation. At the time of recording, that we're about a month out. You might be seeing this closer to that date. But we're going to dive into the impact specifically, implications for real estate related to the election. And we're going to look at kind of a breakdown of what each of the two candidates are kind of proposing with their different policies related to real estate, related to some of the key factors that would, definitely play into real estate, like affordability, supply. Even tax. There's a lot that impacts affordability, obviously, but that, and inflation's a big topic. But all these things have an implication related to the housing market and people's ability to buy and stuff like that. So, yeah,
And
Jimmy.
these two candidates have different opinions. That is for sure. The way that they want to go about it and the way that they see fit to go about it is very different. So, not our job for you to make your decisions for you folks, but certainly what we're intending to do is break that down and show you the differences between the two as you navigate your real estate conclusion as it pertains to the president of the United States. And something really valuable is you've got a former president and a current vice president. So it's not difficult for us to go back into time and look at these two from past experience as well as current experience and what they bring to the table. So Tyler, I know you dug into this further than I did. I was notably busy for the last week or so. So let's let you get started. And my guess is you're going to lead most of this charge, but I'm going to be here on the sidelines.
Yep. So we'll I'm going to look at kind of what each of the candidates are saying, and a couple things on my mind before we even dive into the details is I know there's always a lot of uncertainty, around elections. And Jimmy, I'd like to kind of hear your take. I saw a stat somewhere the other day. I don't remember where I saw it, but it said something along the lines of that historically every 4 years, November's a slower year in real estate on election years. And I think it was kind of pointing out to, just the uncertainty of that more people might be on the sidelines. Is that something kind of looking back, like, do you feel like that's true? Or how have you as a broker, is that something that you get a sense that, perhaps every 4 years it kind of is a little bit of a more uncertain market in November's?
Yeah, I would say from my past experience that November, election year November, is a slower month. It is a time of people figuring things out, looking around, observing, paying attention, and less time and energy put into a house purchase. So I think historically that is the fact. Now the interesting thing is historically we'll see better rates wherever the rates were trending that year will tend to have a dip in the November cycle because those rates reflect the current economy of the current president. And since this current vice president is a candidate for president, those rates will have an impact on her campaign. So we usually see better rates than what we had been trending towards, and we usually see a slowdown in the market with the idea that once that election is complete, then people look, half the population is going to be happy and half the population's mad, right? We know that's always going to be the case. So half of the people are excited about and optimistic about what the future holds, and the other half are frustrated and ticked off that it didn't go their way and that they feel like the world's coming to an end. So that has always been the case and probably will remain the case.
Yep, and we're coming off a massive rate cut, with 50 basis points from the Federal Reserve, right? So that recently happened. I'm not quite sure that it's fully translated to mortgage rates yet, but just it's kind of seeing the timing of that is kind of along the lines of what I feel like you're saying there. But yeah, and then something. I mean, for me, I'm actually like kind of intrigued because I'm actually planning on both selling and buying a house here within the next month. So it will be interesting to kind of see how that plays out, with the market conditions. Hopefully favorably, with whatever I work out with the deal. But anyway.
Yeah. So the other thing I'll tell you is that my wife and I just drove back from Jacksonville, Florida, where our son lives, and from when we went down 2 weeks ago, and then the two weeks later driving back, gas prices are on their way down, and I think that probably is as much election related as anything. So by the time we got home, we were in the low 320 range a gallon for premium, so 93 octane type of stuff, Shell, whatever gas station we stopped at, their premium brand or their premium gas. On the way down, we were 390. On the way back, we were 313, 320, somewhere in that range. So my suspicion is that is just all stuff leading up to an election cycle. If the consumer feels like they have more cash in their pocket, they tend to be more receptive to the party in power. So I think that's just the rates, lower some costs. I have not checked a gallon of milk or a dozen eggs, but I think that the gas is certainly another reflection of an election cycle.
Yeah, that I mean, fuel prices translate into a lot. Obviously, cash in people's pockets, but I think probably even bigger impact is the price of other things that people purchase that they might not necessarily understand to what extent the price of fuel is actually translating into what they're paying at the store for these different things, right? Because I mean, everything has a cost to get transported, and that relates to the price of fuel as well, right? So, I think we're probably, I mean, it's kind of twofold there. I mean, that could really impact the prices of a lot of things as that's coming down or kind of fluctuating one way or another. But yeah, it seems correct as far as what I'm observing too. Looks like I'm seeing fuel prices come down where I'm at too. But yeah, let's kind of dive into like kind of what each of these candidates are saying. And again, I like what you pointed out at the beginning, Jimmy, is it's kind of a unique scenario that we don't often see. I feel like over the course of time, which is you have two candidates where, I mean, literally the past 8 years, we can see kind of how that's played out with having them both in leadership roles. From Trump as the past president, and then Harris as the vice president currently. So we can kind of look back and see, well, kind of what what implications did those two things have on the housing market. And we kind of see, I mean, in my sense working in the industry, I feel like we're looking at two completely different scenarios with each of those 4 years. I mean, we have one scenario where the housing market kind of exploded. The other where I feel like it was really stable by comparison, which is interesting. And I guess there's a couple different sides of that. It's like, hey, if you own a lot of property, that can be one thing. But what if you're just trying to afford a place to live? I feel like that could be a completely different perspective. But that being said, let's kind of dive into what each of these candidates are saying. I think we can go ahead and start with Kamala Harris. And what she's saying. I kind of looked through, the different policies on her actual website. And I kind of extracted the pieces of her policy that I felt really pertained to real estate the most, at least that would either directly impact it or otherwise, affect things such as affordability, because that's probably one of the most key things with real estate, especially from a perspective of being able to buy a house, or anything of that nature. I mean, anything that affects affordability will definitely come into play with that.
Yeah, when it comes with this subject, both of these candidates, what it boils down to is what do their policies do to affordability, and what do their policies do to interest rates? So, from a mortgage perspective, the affordability of a loan. Those are, I mean, I guess there's also, I guess the third would be when you look at real estate and you look at new construction, do they create a path for builders to build more and develop more real estate? We've been in a deficit in terms of the number of homes, and how do they address that deficit? Which obviously, at least in the current days, also includes immigrants, and what do they do to the real estate supply? So, yeah, those are the hot topics as it pertains to these candidates, and how do they each affect them? So,
So yeah, let me share. What I'll do is I'll kind of fire off a few bullet points here over the next couple minutes or so, as far as what I'm seeing, that relates to what Kamala Harris is proposing that she, wants to do. And then we could probably have a conversation around that. And then we can kind of do the same thing with Donald Trump and kind of what he's saying as far as the policies, related to housing. So with Kamala Harris, we got, for one, two tax cuts designed to help middle class and working Americans, the child tax credit and earned income tax credit. They will also expand the child tax credit to provide $6,000 tax cut to families with newborn children. So that's a tax cut. Again, it relates to affordability. And then plan includes rolling back Trump's tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans, enacting a billionaire minimum tax, quadrupling the tax on stock buybacks, and other reforms to ensure the very wealthy are playing by the same rules as the middle class. Under her plan, the tax rate on long-term capital gains for those earning $1 million a year or more will be 28%, where it's currently 20%. And then she has a plan to build 3 million more rental units and homes that are affordable to end the national housing supply crisis in her first term. She will cut red tape to make sure we build more housing faster and penalize firms that hoard available homes to drive up prices for local home buyers. She mentions outlawing new forms of price fixing by corporate landlords. And then her plan also includes expansion of the low income housing tax credit, and additional tax incentives for builders to produce more starter homes, as well as creating a $40 billion tax credit to make affordable projects feasible for builders. And then let's see what else here. As more new homes are built and affordable housing supply increases, she will provide first-time home buyers with up to $25,000 to help with their down payments, with more generous support for first-generation homeowners. So yeah, that's the key things that I was seeing related to her plan, and what she's proposing, or at least saying, that she envisions doing, when in the position of president. So yeah, Jimmy, I mean, what's your take on I guess wherever you want to start with those bullet points there?
Well, the $25,000 first-time homebuyer tax credit concerns me. If we're lacking supply of homes, and we create a tax credit, this will effectively raise prices of homes. This won't decrease the price of a home. This won't make homes more affordable. This will make homes less affordable. So right out of the gate, I get worried when we create this scenario, because honestly, if a buyer has a tax credit of $25,000, if they're willing to spend more, then the seller knows that the buyer has the capability to spend more. And with a lack of supply and a lack of inventory, that's going to drive prices. The other thing that really, I'm glad that you said it, and I'm glad that she said it, but talking about the rental pool, this goes back to 2008. and the government, it's interesting to me that the government is talking about solving the lack of inventory, but the government is the very party that created the lack of inventory. So there no acknowledgement of their role in this, but an acknowledgement that it needs to be fixed. And that role in 2008, when real estate and the economy went to heck in a handbasket, the Wall Street, the big hedge funds and other massive funds, I won't name any specifics, but those guys went out and bought real estate. And the difference is that real estate, the rental world, moved from the small owner, the person that had one or two properties, and it was part of their retirement planning. They lost those properties during the downturn in the market. And then those were bought by corporations that turned that small business of rentals into a big, huge business. That's the challenge that we have, is that those properties are off the market. I can tell you from a firsthand perspective, Tyler, myself and another gentleman, we went into a neighborhood, we bought one house that we put up for rent. And in that particular neighborhood, it was inundated with American Homes for Rent. And so we bought just a house in there. We went out and bought about 10 properties during this period of time, but we bought just one in that neighborhood. We put it up for rent, and my numbers are going to be irrelevant, but we put it up for, let's just say, $2,000 a month. American Homes for Rent took all of their properties and reduced them to $1,900 a rent. So now we're $100 more. So we go down to $1,800. They go to $1,700. They effectively controlled the rent and drove us out of the neighborhood because we couldn't turn a profit, because we couldn't compete with them, because they had, I don't know, 200 homes in this neighborhood for rent, and we had one. There was no way for us to compete with them. Ultimately, we sold it, and now we did make a good return on the appreciation side of this. I think we held it a total of 2 years. So it was long-term capital gains, and we did see some appreciation in that period of time. But in terms of the rental, the long-term strategy, they just destroyed us. So those guys were propped up by the government that now says they'll fix the problem.
Yeah, and that's something I kept seeing, was just kind of expressing the problem with all these these large companies that have acquired so much housing. So it's interesting to see that they're kind of like pointing them out as the issue now, and saying they want to address it, when kind of like you're saying, well, how did we even get to this point?
Well, this is when we bailed out banks, when the government bailed out banking organizations, when they funded things like BlackRock and others, that's where we created this avenue for those guys to load up on inventory. When homes were being foreclosed on in short sales, many of those homes didn't hit the market. They were acquired behind the scenes direct by these large corporations and by these hedge funds, et cetera. And since that time, I haven't looked at these stats as of recent, but I'm going to tell you from 2008 to 2016, 17, 10% of all the homes that were purchased by these large corporations. So even as we worked our way out of that downturn, those homes were acquired, and those homes, when they're taken off the market, they're off the market. They're not coming back onto the market. And I mean, as long as they can continue to manage the rent, and don't forget, entire neighborhoods being built. A developer comes in, develops a neighborhood of 300 homes, and some of these corporations went in and bought them all. Wrote one check to buy the entire neighborhood. So when it was done, it was never, ever owner occupied. It was merely an entire rental community, which if to think that that doesn't have an impact on the neighboring communities and the man and wife who purchased one rental and their goal was to get it paid off by the time that they retired, and then have that rental income. That rental income, if it's near a subdivision dominated by some of these big players, I mean, those dreams are gone.
Yeah, that's yeah, great point. I'm glad you mentioned that. So let's see. So yeah, these tax credits, there's a couple of them mentioned. And so like kind of what I'm seeing with some of these things, and something that crossed my mind as we're going through kind of these bullet points from both candidates, is I feel like, well, hey, when you're in a position like, I mean, you're basically in a position you're marketing yourself right now, right? So something that I'm thinking as I'm reading through all this stuff, like to what extent is this something that sounds good versus it just makes me wonder, like, what is the actual plan? Is this, word for word the actual plan, or is a big piece of this a marketing message that's meant to resonate with certain people out there, where like kind of how you were saying with the 25,000. Well, here's why that's probably not a good thing. And then, but on the flip side, there's probably a lot of people that sounds great too, right? I mean, $25,000, I mean, I feel like for more people that might sound like a positive than, something that might have adverse side effects when implemented. And so that's something that's kind of crossing my mind, and something that I'll think about too. Just looking from both candidates here is like, to what extent is this a marketing message?
Well, and you always want to know, how in the heck are either candidate going to pay for, right? Like you said, is it just a marketing piece to garner votes? If it's legit and if they really intend to do it, how do they pay for it? Because that's where the rubber meets the road, and how does it get paid for? How does it impact? I mean, it's important to remember, regardless of which candidate, it's important to remember that the government doesn't produce anything. All they do is collect taxes, tariffs, etc. So any money that comes out of the government came from taxpayers. So when we start looking at freebies and things being handed out to certain people, then there are other people that are having to pay for that. So as long as it's being managed through the budget and it fits, but right now we have not had a good budget, which we haven't had a well-managed budget in a while, and we've been spending far more than we bring in for quite a number of years now, unfortunately. But it becomes a real concern as how this affects, everyday taxpayers.
Yep. And then something I wanted to, kind of get some more insight on was the mention. She mentions the idea of cutting back red tape to, kind of help more builders build houses faster and whatnot. And again, that's something, okay, that sounds great, but something I wonder is, okay, why is there all this red tape to begin with if we're needing to cut some of it? And so I kind of wanted to get a better understanding. And I actually found someone who's, I feel like he would know. It's the CEO of the National Association of Home Builders, Jim Tobin. He actually commented on this, and I quoted him. He said he welcomes tax incentives to jumpstart development, but said, too many hurdles remain. And here's what he had to say about that. This administration has spoken out of both sides of its mouth. While they talk about more supply, they put more roadblocks in the way of creating more supply. So that's what he was actually saying. So despite the sentiment, hey, we need to cut this red tape, so they're acknowledging, okay, there's a problem here. But he's saying that's coming from the current administration, which Kamala Harris is the vice president in the current administration, right? So I don't know. I just found that interesting that, she has, one of the things she wants to do is cut the red tape, but I'm hearing the red tape's coming from her current, the administration she's currently a part of, which is interesting to hear.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and I will tell you that the soft costs, as the building industry calls it, the road impact fees, the taxation, the permit fees, all of that stuff, it is in the 30% of the overall purchase. So about 30% of the total cost of a home today is just in soft costs. That is in governmental fees that has impacted so when you think about a house, if you were building a $500,000 house, there's $150,000 worth of soft costs. That's extraordinarily high. I mean, how can the average person, their budget is 30% less than what it is because of the soft costs? And that, I don't care which administration, that just seems wrong, that 30% of the cost of your overall project is going to be absorbed by taxation, impact fees, road fees, sewer fees, not the actual development of the sewer or the road, but the paperwork for you to just pay taxes on, and pay taxes, tariffs, and other associated fees.
Yep. And so, and also something that Jim Tobin mentioned too, he kind of made reference to energy efficiency standards, with new housing being developed that's, in place with the government. And what he said about that was that, that would raise metro prices in his area. I believe that's Kansas City, by more than $31,000 per home, while saving an average of $657 in annual energy costs. And so I think that's part of where it's coming from too, is like, okay, now we have these new energy efficiency standards, how, they're kind of dictating, hey, this is how it has to be built. But what's, kind of to that point, I mean, he's saying that's going to raise the actual cost of the house.
So if the cost goes up 31,000 and the savings is 650.
Yeah, in an annual energy savings. So like we have more.
Years.
So I'm hearing more red tape. We're raising the cost to build these things, and there's very minimal benefit, like strictly in terms of the actual prices, right? Because that's the main thing I'm kind of talking about here. So I don't know. I just think that's interesting to hear. I mean, I don't exactly know what cutting red tape means. Like, does that mean we're going to cut back on the energy efficiency requirements, or does that mean we're going to cut some department? Or I mean, how does that happen? Kind of to the point of like, where's this money come from, right? I mean, it sounds like a good idea to an extent. Like maybe for someone, it's going to make some positive impact for, but how does it happen? Like, and that's the big thing I'm trying to understand with all this stuff too. It's like, okay, how are we going to do this, right? Because it's a lot easier said than done with almost all these things.
Well, and I think what you just said is really critical. A lot easier said than done. But what is it like? In the end, what exact red tape goes away? What process happens that makes the process itself easier? We're not advocating for craziness out there and lack of organization in the marketplace, but what can be done realistically? What can be done to make it easier for someone to develop a piece of real estate, to build a home, to remodel a home, et cetera, so that it's more affordable? And some of it's going to come from those standards, but that was a pretty amazing stat. Spend 31,000 to save 657 a year.
Exactly. I mean, because who pays that at the end of the day? The consumer does, the buyer, right? So
the other piece that's so big in all of this is petroleum, because petroleum is such a huge element in the world of construction and development, from your roofing, your insulations, your siding materials, flooring materials. Like the petroleum industry is a huge component to real estate. And at a time when we're receiving a lot of our resources from overseas that cost more money, that is going to have a huge impact on the overall cost of materials. We also, those materials and what's going on in the world right now in terms of wars, natural disasters, etc., all of those things are going to impact the cost of materials and where those materials get allocated, because they're not, we now need to rebuild cities and towns as opposed to developing new ones. We've got people that are going to need that in their home right now, today, tomorrow.
Yep. And so, let's see. Do we want to kind of see on the flip side here? What is?
Yeah, I was going to say, rattle off Donald's and then and talk about a little, and then let's just see if there's any comparison between the two, or let's see if there's any similarities or drastic differences.
All right. So here's again, next couple minutes here, I'm going to go through what Donald Trump is saying his plan would consist of. So Trump plans to rein in federal spending, stop the unsustainable invasion of illegal aliens, which is driving up housing costs. And by the way, I'm reading this straight off of his website. Cut taxes for American families, eliminate costly regulations, and free up appropriate portions of the federal land for housing. So I think that was kind of a summary, and then more details to follow here. So Trump passed a record-setting tax relief for the middle class, doubled the child tax credit, and slashed more job-killing regulations than any administration has ever done before. Real wages quickly increased as a result, and the median household income reached the highest level in history of our country, while poverty reached a record low. President Trump created nearly 9,000 opportunity zones to revitalize neglected communities. Trump will unleash the production of domestic energy resources, reduce the soaring price of gasoline, diesel, and natural gas, promote energy security for all our friends around the world, eliminate the socialist Green New Deal, and ensure the United States is never again at the mercy of a foreign supplier of energy. Trump proposed opening federal land to build new homes, which may ease home shortages afflicting the country. The federal government owns about 28% of the nation's land and would open bidding to developers who promise to keep a certain percentage of the new units available for affordable housing. The proposal could increase the land available for construction, especially in high demand areas, while helping to ease housing shortages and decrease prices by increasing supply. As a real estate developer, Trump said he endured excessive construction and development regulations and has pledged to reduce them if reelected. He's also pledged to lower energy costs for consumers by half if he wins reelection. And I think we already mentioned increasing the fossil fuel production, but he kind of noted too how that impacts home costs, because energy prices consume a significant portion of construction cost. Your heating and air conditioning, electricity, gasoline, all can be cut down in half, Trump said at a campaign in Michigan. And then Trump's deregulation efforts could indirectly benefit the middle class. He stated deregulation could boost company profits and drive up stock prices, which could benefit middle-class families with investments in the stock market. Additionally, fewer regulations might lead to job creation and higher wages, giving the middle class more disposable income and financial security. And then you already said this, but I quoted it too. Regulation costs 30% of a new home, and we will open up portions of federal lands for large-scale housing construction. So that's everything I saw him have input on with his policies and plans related to real estate, which I want to point out something that, I mean, to me, I mean, if as long as we're talking real estate, I feel like it's important to, just at least be aware of this. I mean, Donald Trump built his fortune in real estate, right? So, that's, he has firsthand experience, with supply, with, development. Like, so, these aren't just like policy things for him. Like, he knows what he's talking about firsthand with these kind of things. And so I want to point that out. Not to say that both parties would hopefully have experts in their corner who are also knowledgeable in these things, right? But yeah. Anyway, Jimmy, what's your thoughts kind of with all that? I think I just like reading all through all that. I kind of have something else that stood out to me, but I kind of want to hear your take as well.
Well, the thing is that federal land, I'm really intrigued by this. That the government owns 28% of the land in our country. But I'm intrigued of the use of that federal land because it came up on the vice president debate. And in watching that subject came up. And I don't remember when they asked the question, when the moderators asked the question, I don't remember Vance's response because it was directed at him because him being Donald's vice president candidate. But I am intrigued by that. I don't know what exactly it includes. I'm assuming we're not doing away with parks, national landmarks. I'm assuming it is other pieces. Maybe it is repurposing, but that's federal land versus state. So federal, I'm trying to think military bases, post something, anything postal related.
Like protected. I know there's like land that's like protected or something.
Well, I'm assuming if it's protected lands like swamps or forestry, I'm making the assumption. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm making the assumption those kind of pieces of land aren't included in this. So I am really curious as to what pieces are included. The other piece, that can be a little concerning is when you start to use governmental land for real estate development, especially for residential housing projects, it is making sure that the opportunity is out there for all developers. You know what I'm saying? Not just a select few of people bidding around the country grabbing these projects, because if you get a national player who bids on doing these projects and they win project in Indiana where I am, and they win a project in Texas where you are, and one in Utah, and this, that, and the other, well, they don't really build in all of these states. They'll just sub it out, and then the cost of those projects becomes even greater. And if the cost goes up, then that means the end product is more expensive, whether it's for rent or for sale, the end product. So, I'd like to see an emphasis on local jobs, local builders, local developers in the towns, in the communities where this land is, as opposed to some sort of conglomerate coming in. That'd be my first thought, is let's make sure that these things filter down to the communities in which they're going to serve. Let's make sure that the residents of those communities benefit the most from this development.
Yep. And that makes sense. And I mean, so he mentioned too what he did with opportunity zones. Obviously, we saw that come into play. When that was all coming out. Like, what's your take on that? I mean, I think that's kind of interesting to be able to point to that as like, hey, here's something I actually did. That helped to revitalize some areas. But what was your experience when that all rolled out?
Well, we had good success with those opportunity zones here in Indianapolis. Matter of fact, I myself and another investor, we bid on a project because it was in a zone. We didn't get it, but the driving force for us putting in this bid is the fact that it was within the boundaries of an opportunity zone, and those have serious tax implications. Those create serious tax opportunities for the investors of those. And what they did is they took the most blighted areas of major metropolitan communities, and they created these tax opportunities so that money was filtered into those areas and revitalized. That is one of the, so far what I've seen, one of the best ways to create low income is when you're taking a product that already exists and you're reimagining it, and you're creating an incentive for the business community, for the investor community to come in and add a complementing feature. Repurposing, reusing existing structures. I mean, look, we can keep building, we can keep sprawling, we can keep going out and out and out and out. But the reality is, if I drive down the road and there's empty warehouses and there's empty old retail stores, why aren't we converting those into structures and converting them into uses that better serve our communities? That to me makes so much more sense than to continue to build when we have product out there that can be renovated. And I understand sometimes there's inefficiencies, but this gets into that red tape. We start, everything is a problem. We can't have that, or you can't have that, or you can't have that. But the reality is, when we're saying we can't have all these things, we have people that live on streets that would die to have any of that. And I'm not wanting to provide subpar housing or unsafe environments for people, but I do think the reusing and the repurposing of existing real estate is better than the constant demolition and redevelopment that we see so frequently.
Yep. Makes sense. Something that kind of stood out to me, like just contrasting, reading through Kamala Harris's plans and then contrasting that with Donald Trump's, is like, to me, what stood out is I feel like Trump's approach is a lot more like fueling free markets versus, like, from Kamala Harris, I'm hearing a lot of like, hey, here's what the government will do. Here's what the government will do. And even, hey, we'll cut back the red tape as well. So on one hand, we're doing more, but on the other hand, we're going to cut back this part of it so that we can get more housing supply. But with Trump's, it's kind of like pointing to like, hey, here's how we're going to make it easier for people in the free markets to operate, including going back to the, federal land. The idea was, hey, have bids on that and open up this land for development. Not, hey, not necessarily, hey, here's what the government's going to do. Just like, hey, we have this land, let's put it to use in a way that could help with that. And then even a lot of the mentions of lowering, energy costs, lowering regulation, just to make it easier to operate, for people. And so to me, that just sounds a lot more like free markets. Hey, let's let the free markets do their thing versus like, hey, let's step in and do this, that, the other, just from a more government level of things.
Well, I think it's the base that each party is appealing to, right? So Donald's base is described as a Caucasian male, working class. I mean, that is what is described as his base. I don't know exactly what Kamala's is, but when you're tailoring your message around your largest group of supporters. So Donald Trump's supporters aren't looking for handouts. They are looking for opportunities that they can work hard and benefit from their hard work. But if you've got a group of people that wants freebies, then that's what you're appealing to. So I did hear that when you said it, tax cuts, freebies versus opportunities. The old saying, teach someone, hand them a fish or teach them how to fish, right? And I'd much rather teach the world how to fish. So it's I do think that is a dramatic difference between the two parties. And I think depending on your perspective and where you come from is how you'll view that. But I think if we can empower people to work and we can empower people to um, be a part of a community and work in that community and have the pride of that work and the pride of that ownership of their contribution. Um, in general, that makes our country stronger and better.
Yep, and then like the cost of fuels too. I think that's just so significant because it impacts a lot of things, from money in the pocket to trickling down into other areas like Trump pointed out. But I think the stance in fossil fuels, I don't think it really went said here. I mean, Trump kind of mentioned it, but I know with Kamala Harris, kind of her side of things, they're a lot more all about pushing all the green stuff versus Trump. I don't think he really cares one way or another. I think he wants what's best for like what makes the most sense in our pockets, whatever that looks like. And so that's something where kind of impacting affordability, again, it trickles into all areas, not just kind of how he pointed out, well, hey, we could cut down cost of air conditioning, electricity, gasoline by half. That's what he was saying. But just how that translates into everything we buy at the grocery store, anything that gets delivered, from materials to build houses. I mean, it really affects everything. And maybe that's why, like, I didn't really see Kamala Harris really mention much anything. I mean, by contrast, it seems like that's something Trump's talking more about, but maybe that's because, they know that's, hey, the green stuff isn't really cost effective at this point. I mean, obviously if you're not having to pay for the fuel, but the whole thing is, well, in order to get that there, there's a significant cost. And, and we're not really quite, I think it's a progression, like, hey, to really go green, it's like, hey, there's a timeline, but we're not at a point in the timeline where it's a cost effective thing, or where it's, economically benefiting the average American. And I think that's where Trump's kind of leaning into that, is like, hey, here's how we can make this situation better sooner rather than not.
It's actually, not only is it not helping the average American, it's actually costing the average American, because manufacturers of these products that look at the car industry, they're being forced to produce so many green vehicles, but their green vehicles aren't selling at a pace that is keeping up with production. So who bails these car companies out? The United States government. Who provides the resources to the United States government? Oh, it comes from taxation of us. So it's there is an ideal, and listen, I'm all in favor of saving the world, and I'm all in favor of the cleanest and best air, and I'm all in favor in the cleanest and best water and environment and et cetera. But I think what we're disputing in the two parties is the process to getting there and how quickly you can get there versus and then the economic impact of getting there. So there is somewhere in there a good timeline that works for all. I don't know it. I'm certainly not smart enough to figure that out. But I don't think that when we've got products sitting out there, when we've got wind farms sitting out there that don't generate as much as they cost to put them up, that those things become pretty scary.
Oh yeah, and it's crazy where I'm at. There's actually a lot of wind farms. If you drive within an hour, you see them everywhere. It's insane. Like in the middle, like there's literally nothing there except wind farms. It's the craziest thing. But one thing I want to kind of add, and then I mean, Jimmy, any final thoughts you have is, I think regardless, kind of we're pinpointing, hey, here's what they're saying policy wise. And I think probably the most interesting thing I could leave our listeners with is, I mean, you have two situations where you have 4 years of past performance. I mean, Trump was, president over 4 years, and then you have Kamala Harris. She's been vice president these past 4 years. So they've both been in key roles in leadership in our nation, 4 years respectively. And I think what's interesting is if, you as a listener do your research, I would tell you, hey, look at like, okay, what was housing affordability like over that course of time? What was, housing prices? That's one thing you can look at, but another thing you can look at is, um, cost of consumer goods, cost of fuel, kind of, because it's going to trend. You'll see how, okay, over these years, here's where it's trended. Here's how much it's gone up, gone down, whatever the case is with any particular thing. But compare and contrast that, because again, you have key leaders in these roles over each of these past 4 years. So this isn't a scenario where we're hearing from new people. We don't even know, what they may or may not actually do. I mean, we can see what's been done over that period of time for each. You can also look at what's the inflation been, the consumer price index. There's a lot of key metrics you can look at. So I would implore you, hey, do your own research, on each of these two candidates here, and kind of compare and contrast like what it is they're saying that they plan on doing going forward, to how that actually played out, in the time where they've been in these key roles, right? And I think it will be interesting if you kind of look at that yourself. And I mean, ultimately, if there's one last thing I can leave you with, it's go and vote. And get your friends to come with you. What I'm not telling you who to vote for, but I'm saying, hey, go out and vote, and make sure that the people in your life who are eligible to vote, which is probably most of your friends and family members, make sure that they go out and do the same thing. Bring them with you, have some fun with it. Have a dinner party, something like, get people together and just make an event, and just make sure that you make your vote heard, because it does count.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to be quite interesting as we talk about going and voting and the importance of all of this. I absolutely agree. Everyone needs to vote. With the current disasters that have happened, I wonder how the folks in Asheville, North Carolina, are going to get to vote. I just, when you look at all of that, I wonder what all of what's going on in this country, what it does to everybody's ability to vote. And then the other thing is as you're reviewing the last 4 years, and then maybe the previous 4 years, as you're analyzing both of these candidates, take into consideration that COVID was stuck right in there. And what was COVID's role in all of this? Because it certainly had a dramatic impact there. That's the hard part, right? It's being able to go through all the rhetoric and get to the facts of what did or didn't happen, or what a party did or didn't support, or what position a party does or doesn't have. That's what becomes really, really so difficult for us, or for anyone in that matter. So, but the bottom line is, each and every week we are going to have agent broker conversations right here and deliver them to you on Monday mornings at 10 a.m. in hopes that you will enjoy those conversations, hopes that you will chime in, post, comment, like, dislike, disagree, agree, whatever it is that you feel so inclined to do. But each and every week, we're going to bring those conversations to you. And we hope you come back each and every week for those conversations. Until next week, have a great week.